I'm Erika. I'm a visual artist. I'm working a lot with museums and collections, making installation works and moving image. I work already with museums and collections, and I was interested in the idea of shifting to look at museums in relationship to data and thinking about the potential here of perhaps expanding the research I'd already done, but using technology like machine learning and AI that might help me to come to museums and come to materials and collections in a different way. The research takes me through material and it sort of takes me on a journey. Every time I've encountered working with museums, I'm usually pushed to have to try and turn my practice on its head, as in know what I want before I go into a space. So the work from the residency is going to be a kind of hybrid between a physical object, a kind of live database piece of work, and a lot of it's going to be sound related. And the final piece will be this instrument plus various elements of archival material that comes straight from the archives, a film that I'm making. Where I've arrived at is working with the Southeast Asian material from the Tate and the Wellcome collection. And for me, the Tate is looking at modern and contemporary art, and the Wellcome is often dealing with health and wellness. So going back to the idea of collections and art canons and nations. I've made an instrument, it's called a diagnostic instrument, and I've taken that instrument into the Tate and into the Wellcome Institute to try and see how the sounds that it's producing respond in the space. And the sound the instrument's producing comes from the data from those two institutions. And the diagnostic instrument is at the moment a sort of a prototype. We have 3 works in the Tate that were on display from Southeast Asia, and the first is Vong Phao Phanet and Claire Bouzier's Neon Rice Field, which was in the Tate for almost a year, and then it was coming down, so we filmed that coming down. And I worked with Shanti, the daughter, to film this work, so there was a kind of connection between who was filming and the objects that were there. And Kim Lim's piece of work, Sphinx, is on display, and I recently made a piece of work that connected with Kim Lim, so I was also incorporated in the piece of work. And finally, David Modella's Sand Machine. I've been working with Noel de Leon, who's a performance artist who's also worked with David in the past, to sort of perform in the space. So these kind of intergenerational, kinship, networked kind of connections come out through the work. That's something I've devised, but it's also something I would almost hope might arise through machine learning and ways of thinking about machine learning and AI that might be generative. And in this moment in time, I suppose, there's trying to think about how practice generates connections and how machine learning might generate connections. Where does it flatten things and where does it open up and expand? So one of the research questions was around surfacing bias or surfacing histories that we might not already know about. And one of the things I'm trying to do in the work is also make a connection between historical material and contemporary material. So between museums that hold perhaps a material culture or kind of ethnographic material to material that holds fine art, and think about also the amount of material in those museums in terms of Southeast Asian material, and then the kind of poverty of the collection within the contemporary art field. So here I am filming in the Wellcome collection and trying to make connections with specific sorts of materials. Thinking about machine learning and AI, I was very unfamiliar with how it worked. So in many respects, this project has been me getting to terms with what actually is machine learning and how can it be interesting and useful for me. And some of that's been quite difficult. Probably that's one of the key things, is how do we work with machine learning? How do we work with AI? How do we try and uncover in large sets of information? You know, I falsely believed that machine learning would allow me to collect and bring it all together and be able to just find the Southeast Asian material and somehow create almost like my own database of Southeast Asian material. And that hasn't been possible, and I think that's just a realization of how technology potentially gives you this illusion of what's possible, but reality is there's still a lot of labour involved.